Oh, Tully, it's great to have you here, man. Great to connect.
Stoked we could make it work.
Yeah. How is life, all in all?
Life is good, man. It's it's been a big 3 months actually. We got married in the middle of January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And that kind of sparked a bunch of, I guess, evolution in how we're showing up in partnership, but then also like moving forward as well and how we want to show up because we were doing a lot of work together. And so it's kind of had us reflect on what we actually want to be doing. And then that's brought some changes. So it's been a real, I guess, a couple of months of like sifting and sorting and redefining what I'm about and redefining what Kat's about and redefining what we're about. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's been quite a like on the outside looking in, it looks like it's been just like smooth sailing, and then on the inside, it's actually been like,
Full on?
yeah, full on,
Transformative,
yeah, very
fiery,
much,
turbulent.
yeah, letting go of old stories, like
Yeah.
welcoming in new stories, and just letting go of attachment to how things are supposed to look. Like we work together, we've got this business together, we're getting married. This is how it should look to build something together.
Right.
And it's like, oh, I didn't realize how attached I was to that. And that might not be true for Kat anymore to that extent. So it's like, okay, well, how does this look? And just it's amazing. And you have those realizations. You're like, you think you're not attached to outcomes because you have these realizations, and then you realize, and then you realize. And so it's it's been a time of that. But the last few weeks, it's all kind of landed.
Okay.
So feeling really clear.
Great.
With everything that I'm doing. So
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I do love, I really appreciate how honest you are with those inner situations and inner changes and the relational challenges and beauties and highs and lows. I really do love how you and Kat are very transparent and honest with your happenings. You know, I think it's really helpful and a huge part in creating inspiration for what's possible. Like we touched upon, just opening up the conversation really about the old paradigm of what it is to be married and what it is to have a family and so forth. Being honest with the challenges that can come with challenging that old way and moving into quote unquote the new paradigm. It's not all smooth sailing. It can be challenging, bumping up against that old conditioning, bumping up against what's kind of like gravity. Like when we're in a societal norm, there's a vortex to it, there's a vibration to it, a predominant frequency to it, which is kind of like a force like gravity, which is why it's kind of easier just to do it how the rest of the tribe is doing it, do it how the rest of your society is doing it. That's why it's so tempting to move away, you know, move to Byron Bay or move to Bali or move somewhere where there's a more conducive vortex, a more conducive environment. So like, again, it's very tempting, yet it feels very beneficial to sit in the fire of the challenge and the confrontation and those external expectations and just go deep. And I remember my teacher Ram Dass saying in the 70s when students would come up and say like, I've had enough of the busy city, like it triggers the shit out of me, I need to get out of here and like do what you did and go up to the Himalayas and find a guru. And then post that whole 70s movement where he matured and found a deeper practice, he's like, stay fucking right in the city, sit in the fire and wake up there. And that really sits with me well. Another thing he often says is, you think you're enlightened, like hang out with your parents or hang out with your family. But I mean, I love hanging out with my family for the most part. There are some that bring up old, heavy, conditioned stuff like, holy shit, I thought I was done with that. And then all of a sudden they kind of mirror it back. So I think they are vital teachings. For so long as seekers, we've gone elsewhere to seek. And even Buddha apparently did that. You know, he got a glimpse of his dharma, his path, and then all of a sudden, apparently, he left his young baby and his wife to seek enlightenment. You know, so that's like deep in us as well. Like, okay, you want to wake up to your heart, to your soul, to your spirit, like go on the pilgrimage, by yourself.
Mm.
Yet now this new conversation of bringing the transformation, bringing the yoga, bringing whatever it is we want to call it into the household, into the family. So it's really great to connect with another hubby
Yeah.
doing it the way you're doing it. You know?
Yeah, man. And it's so interesting. You're like open with that, because that to me has been the journey. It's almost like I know things need to change and how things are being done. That doesn't feel right. So I'm going to go and find something else. And then almost via, like, you go to Byron Bay or you go to Bali, via osmosis, you're awake now and you're spiritual now, and it's all landed. And then coming back, that's when you know how much of it actually sticks.
Right.
I find, like, and
Totally.
it's really humbling and really grounding, especially the family piece, because they know, you know, like, it's almost like I use it as a good barometer. Like, it's not so much they have to change as well, but how much can I sit with their reflections and not actually be triggered by it? Because if that trigger's still there, it's like, oh wow, that curiosity, it's like, that's interesting.
For sure.
It's like, am I actually embodying all these things that I'm talking about or posting on Instagram? Or, you know, it looks pretty and it looks, and over here it actually does feel good, but how much of it is in me? And can I bring to my family and bring to where I'm going?
Totally.
And the importance of just starting in the home. Like, I have to keep bringing myself back to that, because you can get caught up in the service and the community, because that's what it's all about. But it's like, me first, partnership and family second. It's like, how solid is this actually, before I go and overextend myself into changing the world?
Couldn't
kind of
agree
thing.
more. Couldn't agree more. And it feels like a balance between, like, the importance of going within and reconnecting just with yourself, whether that is in a room by yourself or whatever it is. Maybe one does not escape, but head off to a retreat or something like that by themselves every now and then. I mean, Joe and I haven't for several years, but we still see the importance of it. It's definitely in our foresight of, like, yeah, if either of us is, like, hitting the wall or overwhelmed, like, yeah, it's beneficial to pull away temporarily and gain perspective and refresh. Kind of like what you said, kind of what you're doing here, just some Tully time, you know?
Exactly.
It's totally beneficial. And same with me, like, if I go too long without bro time, just getting away with the bros and either getting on the earth, camping, or getting to a sweat lodge, or just even a day of sweating, swimming, surfing, whatever. If it's been too long, I can feel it. Especially being in a household of girls, 2 little girls, and Joe, these powerhouse Shaktis. It feels very important just to keep that in my vision, to nourish that. All parts of myself, and then I'm a better dad, a better lover, better everything. Yeah.
And it's such good awareness to have, because otherwise you can almost end up trying to solve problems that aren't there, because then, you know, that's when fights will get picked, or because you'll just be stressed over. So you can think you've got all these issues to solve in work or in your family life, and it's like, actually, that you might just be creating that to create the space that you need. So it's having that awareness to proactively take space, so you don't get it by causing conflict.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get the space one way or another if you need it. And
Totally.
you can either do it proactively and then with enjoy, or you can do it the other way. And so it's, having that awareness, and even the practicalities of scheduling it in. It's like, I know once a month I need a weekend away or a day away or whatever it might be. Each week I need an hour, or like, I find the practicalities of, over time, realizing what I need and making sure the next few months it's there.
Cool.
Not waiting until it hits boiling point and then, like, oh yeah, I should go and do that.
Yeah.
And being proactive about it,
That's
find
smart.
super
I could
beneficial.
probably be better with that.
Yeah.
I think I sometimes wait a bit too long.
Yeah,
and
me
I'm like,
too.
I gotta get away.
yeah. That's it. I'm saying it, but it's something I'm definitely still learning. Probably always will be to some extent.
Cool. I've been keeping an eye on your posts, and like I touched upon before, very inspiring. Something that struck a chord a little while ago was the emotional resilience, and specifically speaking to men. This emotional resilience and agility in our emotionality. It really hit home, as you'd be well aware of, what it used to be a man, and the kind of just buck up, the kind of armor that one usually accumulates over time of being a man. Just get on with it, provide, get on with it. This new mode that men are cultivating seems to be happening, for one, and the conversations are happening. Can you speak to that way of being, that emotional agility? What is that all about to you?
I guess to me, it's developing range and understanding. I think as humans, naturally, we like to put things in a box so we can understand it. Like, that's what we like to do. Like, okay, so that's what that is, and that's what that is. And so it's like, this is what being a man is, and this is what being a woman is, and that's what it looks like. And any unknown or any versatility is harder for our mind to comprehend. So we don't like to do that. But to me, like, emotional agility is understanding that you can go to certain places and you don't have to live there. So for me, my personal experience was I was more in touch with the softer emotions. So it's not like I would do it all the time. And when I did it, I had some level of shame around it, but crying and expressing compassion and those softer emotions. But the anger and all of that sort of stuff, I just put in a that's not me
Right.
box. And I just avoided it because of the stories I'd made up about it along the way. So for me, developing that emotional agility is actually, I can go to all four corners when required, but I don't need to live in either of them. And I feel like so many men, myself included, don't want to access certain parts of ourselves because we think that'll put us in that box.
Right.
And it's like, actually, no, that just means you can go and stand in that box when required. And I think sometimes life naturally brings this more out. So sort of having children, I'm not a dad myself, but I can imagine having children opens up a whole new level of love and compassion that you can access, and unconditional, that sort of side of yourself. And they've even shown when you have kids, our estrogen production goes up as men. So it's that ability to co-bond and all of those things. So sometimes life naturally takes us there, but often that isn't always the case. So it's about, developing that so that when we need to, and actually understanding what these emotions offer.
Yeah.
Because I think we are, as a society, are pretty emotionally illiterate. And so we think anger's bad, or we think sadness is bad. And you see it all the time. Somebody's sad and it's quickly go and look after them so they stop crying because sadness is bad. Or if somebody's angry, that's bad. And it's actually what we're doing with the emotion and not the emotion itself that can be the damaging thing. So suppressing it, or so we might see somebody that we think is angry, and it's actually, that's not anger in its true sense. That's aggression. That's somebody who suppresses their anger so much that it boils over, and what you're seeing, that person throwing the thing or shouting or hurting someone or whatever it might be, that's actually not what anger is. That's aggression. That's suppressed anger coming out. And so we just disconnect from all of it. And I'll speak for myself, like I just disconnected from, I guess why I'm so passionate about this topic is for a long time I disconnected from the ability to feel anger, which also meant I disconnected from my personal power, from a lot of my personal confidence, and just my ability to set healthy boundaries and all of these things that come along with that emotion. So it's this on or off switch rather than this fluidity. And emotional agility is about developing more fluidity with it and more ability to access different parts of it.
Awesome. Sounds very similar to the Buddhist practice of the middle way, the middle path. Have you gone into that at all?
No, not specifically.
Similar, not quite as kind of different quadrants, so to speak, but the middle path is like the practice of receptivity, really, and equanimity. So not so much sweeping negative shit under the rug, so to speak, or being adverse to it, more being able to sit again in the fire of the negativity or what is perceived to be negativity. Doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just a force, like gravity once again. Negativity is a part of polarity. And with positivity, being able to embrace it, relish it, harness it without clinging to it. So there's that middle way. which sounds very similar to that emotional agility, like being with what is. Okay, here's anger, here's bliss, here's the full spectrum, here is what is, and that ability to witness it and then respond with emotional intelligence rather than that old emotional reactivity. It's quite a fine practice. It's a very advanced like yoga practice and meditation and tantric practice to do it authentically, because there's that kind of spiritual trap of like spiritual bypassing and kind of toxic positivity and like
love and light.
Love and light. Yeah. Okay, like it's a very fine practice, and to do it without guiding or mentorship, to do it by yourself is a real quote unquote like hero's journey, to really do it honestly and stay accountable and again honest. It's really deep, and I think it takes revisiting again and again, and like group work, discussing it, picking it apart, because we're so good at deluding ourselves and convincing ourselves, and then that suppressed anger just pops up in all kinds of ways. And I can really relate to that as well. I grew up being a very nervous kid, very anxious, and it would come out in night terrors and just lying and just really shitty behavior. And I remember a very distinct time, and I talk about it a lot. As a teenager, I just became like fed up with it. It became like an inner, at the time, probably excessively like judgmental, like repulsed kind of thing. Like, oh, like I'm just done with this anxiety and anger and just this intense polarity. And that led to experimenting with drugs actually as a way to get in touch with, I didn't realize it, but in retrospect, as a way to get out of my head and observe. And it was destructive. It wasn't good. Yet it had in it gems of getting out of my mind and watching, which seems crucial, because when we're just in our nervous system and in our emotionality, it's very hard to see it clearly. Again, without like speaking to someone else or being staring at that accountability mirror and getting so impeccably honest with it, or having that mentor or that psych or something. So do you have tools to, I just ranted on about that middle path thing and then beyond, but do you have tools to really cultivate that emotional agility, a practice or anything like that?
Yeah, and it's kind of gone in phases, because when I first sort of realized it or came across it, doing sort of somatic releasing or express and release work, because before you can sort of understand or express what you're feeling, you actually need to feel it. That's kind of step one, which is where for a lot of guys, that's the starting point, is like, what am I actually feeling? The reason they're not expressing is because they don't know. Like, are you frustrated? I don't know. I don't know what frustration feels like.
Right.
Kind of thing. Are you angry? I don't, like, there's no answer, because we're not in touch with that. So initially it was just going into expressing and accessing the emotion. And that didn't look like emotional agility. That looked like polarizing to one end for a little while, for maybe a month, sort of where I'm just like, this is my focus, just to feel all of it that I've suppressed. So, and then you can come back, because then it's like, okay, now I know where that end of the spectrum actually is. Because we can't find harmony. It's like polarize before you harmonize kind of thing.
I get that. Yeah.
Let's go out here. Okay, that's how much rage I can feel. That's what's actually inside of me. Okay. And then being able to work back from there. So in terms of practices, I don't necessarily do that anymore. But as a starting point, that was hugely beneficial. And the growth I've experienced in this area was a result of having that initial period of just going into it. Like you say, with group work, with mentors, with these people that could hold the space for me to go into it. That is a really important first step, I find. And then for me now, it's just introspection and reflecting and using triggers. Whenever I feel myself triggered, approaching it with curiosity. That's interesting what's going on here. Because as soon as my truth isn't a frustrated person. So if I'm frustrated, something's going on. And then reflecting internally on that. And then the further I go along the path, I guess, um, the keener that introspection gets. But I always need outside mirrors as well. So for the day to day, it might look like journaling. It might look like I just sort of do it in my head and I do just approach it all with curiosity. And then that will dissolve a lot of it. And then I've got coaches or mentors or friends that will call me on my shit if required.
The buddy system, very
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, very
Hmm.
helpful. So I've got a lot of guys in different sort of circles that I can go to for that as well. But in terms of a daily practice, it's that introspection, and especially if any triggers come up, not putting that to the side. It's like, actually, there's something here for me. And you might not be able to go into it then and there, but at the end of the day or when you've got space, it's like, okay, that shouldn't be annoying me as much as it is. Like, what's going on there? And that's definitely the most powerful practice I've found, is just reflecting on these triggers and owning it's all in me somewhere. So what's this telling me about how I can show up? Oh, I need to set a boundary there, because every time that person does that, I feel this way. So yeah, so that's definitely the triggers and reflections piece is the most life-changing practice I've implemented for sure.
Cool. There's another metaphor, another practice, but a metaphor that works in with that as well, of sitting with the trigger, sitting with the discomfort, and that is transforming poison into nectar. And I use that all the time because it's very useful, because it seems almost counterintuitive at first to sit with the trigger, work with the trigger consciously. It's very uncomfortable at first. Yeah, it polarizes the experience. It at first it can inflame it, especially at first when you're not used to shifting it and breathing through it and so forth. But that initial paying close attention to anything, but especially a trigger, feels poisonous. It feels like it gets you tighter. It can make people even purge when they really, really get into it, if it's deep, deep shit. And then if you do the work effectively, there's a deep release, similar to when one really lets themselves cry. Even if they're really going through some heavy shit, mourning, grieving, if they really let themselves cry, eventually there'll be a release and they will feel empty again, in the Buddhist vantage point of emptiness, which is blissful.
Yeah.
Empty of mind. The mind is free. We're connecting again to our true self. And if we let ourselves do what is necessary to get that release, the poison shifts into nectar and we're present again. But again, that we're in a society where we can map out our day, map out our week. So we're constantly avoiding discomfort and staying cocooned in that comfort zone. And it's such a strange paradox, because you stay in that comfort zone too long and it gets very uncomfortable. The symptoms are the states of depression, anxiety, and even suicide that is really running rampant now, of this stagnation of people's nervous systems getting overloaded and dull, and the mind's getting dull and sleepy and overloaded. And then the phone thing keeps coming into every conversation. Again, like people's kind of receptor sites for intelligence and that sharpness of paying attention, and those harmonies of serotonin and dopamine and so forth. They're getting so fired off like crazy with this new technology. It really does take the time to extricate ourselves from all that stuff, unplug temporarily, sit and do your practice, or whatever the practice is. It can be a workout. It can be this, that, and the other. I think in today's world, people tend to further exacerbate those imbalances, though.
Definitely.
So that even really requires close attention. Am I just like, so if my nervous system is fried and I'm unable to pay attention and do that work that you're speaking of, am I just exacerbating that by going to the gym and blasting techno music and in these highly insulated shoes and come home and I'm further fried, and then I have dreams and nightmares and I can't even sleep. So addressing all those things, some people say they don't have time, which can be legitimate if people have like a 9 to 5 or 6 to 10 job,
whatever it is these days.
whatever it is. Like, what the fuck? How are they gonna pay attention to these things? And what I like to suggest is, like, if you legitimately don't have time, like you're stuck in that 9 to 5 or longer, listen to podcasts on your way to work, or get those grounding, like people even have like grounding mats. They're so unable to get their feet on the actual earth. They got grounding mats.
Yeah.
Can be helpful, if you're in those busy cities like Japan and Tokyo and Manhattan and stuff like that, and you're literally in these high-rise buildings all day, you can't get your feet on earth. You can't sit and actually do your practice. You can.
But you can. There's always time.
There's always time. There's these technologies to help nourish people, which I like to slide in there because people are overwhelmed. People are overwhelmed now. People are losing their shit left, right, and center, and it can feel overwhelming to even make that choice to do the inner work that we're speaking of.
Because that half the time, either A, they don't know what it looks like, or B, people think they've tried. Like you say, okay, I've got to exercise. I'll go to the gym every day after work in my shoes with the music, with the stimulation. I'm still on my phone. They do that for a month, feel no better, maybe worse. And then it's like, well, I've tried. And then so you pile on feeling disheartened to that big list you had before, and learned helplessness kicks in. It's like, well, what's the point? I've had a crack. None of my friends are feeling any better. What's the point?
Right.
And that learned helplessness is, I feel, underpins all of what you meant, like the depression and all of that. It's that not even that where I am is painful, because half the time they're numbing themselves from the pain with, and it's so capitalized. Like there's so much money made of people numbing themselves, shopping, food, social media, and then social media market, like all of that is billions of dollars made of people feeling like shit.
Yeah.
And so I think if people can remove that stimulus a little bit, enough to feel the pain, then they'll move. It's like the old fable of the dog sitting on the nail. It's like half the time it's not a comfort zone, it's just a familiar zone. Just been here so long, this feeling of disconnection or this feeling of anxiousness or whatever it is. It started when I was young, and I'm still feeling it, and it's so familiar. So feeling free actually feels unfamiliar. Feeling love and connection feels unfamiliar. And that's why so many people get a taste and then rebound, experience love in a relationship, then pick a fight, because our nervous systems aren't actually conditioned to feel that good for that long, because they've never done it before. So understanding that sort of conditioning process as well, I find really, really helpful. But until somebody gets either, people change out of pain and desperation or joy and inspiration. So until one of those can be present, no change will ever happen. And so it's either getting real enough with the pain that they're in, which requires them to feel something, or be so inspired by something. One of those two things has to happen. Otherwise, the cycle repeats.
Totally. Yeah, what you're the kind of relapsing. It's very similar to a drug addict relapsing. They know they shouldn't, they don't want to consciously, but those cycles in yoga, they're called samskaras, those grooves in the mind and the subtle mind and the nervous system. It's so strong, like a drug addiction. You don't want to yet back in that rut, back in that groove, because it's familiar, like you said, and it takes fierce and loving commitment, or like you said, that inspiration. I mean, that grace in which it's just undeniable. Yeah, so that either rock bottom, like fuck, I just gotta change, or that inspiration, but unfortunately, we can't get ahead of ourselves. We like some things we can fake it till we make it. And this is one of them. Like you can listen to a chat by Guru Singh and Rich Roll, they were speaking about like the process of getting the momentum of good
Yeah.
stuff. And they used the analogy of like a car. There's the battery and the starter engine, so that sparks it up. That's kind of like the initial momentum of like, do something to get some positivity, some fire, spark it up. That's like the battery. And then something else kicks in a little deeper. That's often after that like 30-day mark. You know, you gotta get to that 30-day mark and then keep going. And then that starter engine kicks up. There's a deeper transformation that happens, a deeper momentum. That's where some bigger transformation can occur. Those samskaras, those grooves of the mind start to transform. And then you're in the real engine eventually. But for many, that's either, it can be a while. It can be a fucking while, you know? Those old patterns and that old chemistry is so familiar and it runs deep. And not to mention the more astral and subtle and karmic conditioning and like genetic familiarity and like all of that. It's deep, fucking deep. And even though I've done so much work on it, every now and then, especially if I'm tired, sleep deprived, haven't been taking care of myself as much as I would prefer, even still after years of doing this, it can still come up. Can't get complacent.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's almost though you wouldn't want it any other way.
Right.
As well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I've arrived now. Huh, this is boring. So it's embracing the whole, you know, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, like actually getting that in your cells. Because that's so the truth. As you say, you know, you've been on this journey for however many years and it's still the journey. And so I feel like if people put too much pressure on this destination to deliver everything that they wanted it to deliver, that's also when people would relapse or revert back because they're like, oh, I did it and I got there and it wasn't it. And it's like, well, you're still missing the point. It's actually, you know, life is a verb. It's a doing word. It's the process.
Yeah.
And also understanding that the power of environment, two things like the power of identity and the power of environment. And what we spoke about at the beginning of the conversation about not running away to sometimes that break in environment, you actually need that because otherwise every minute of every day, you're surrounded by an environment that reminds you of who you were.
Right.
And we will live into the identity that we believe we are. We'll live into that. So unless that has wiggle room, like loosen the lid on the jar a little bit, unless that's got room to move, it's very, very, very difficult. Like if I didn't change my environment, I know I wouldn't have been able to create the changes in myself that I've done.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean you need to leave and never come back, but that's why retreats are so powerful because it gives people the space. There's not that constant stimulus of this is who you are. It's like, oh, hang on. And they can reconnect to their truth a little bit and take that. And then when they get back, they're like, oh, wow, this really isn't me. This is actually painful because there's some contrast now. So yeah, retreats and those things are powerful if there's, you know, and then you, at the very minimum, it's waking people up to the pain that they're feeling when they go back to their current lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, cool. Well, now that we've established that, what are we going to do? Because either change is going to happen now or you're going to wait 5 years and it's going to be a lot more painful. And then it's going to have to happen then. So yes, we're stepping into the unknown. Yes, it's scary. It's always going to be scary. So you either choose to do it now, in the now, with the awareness you have, or wait till it gets more painful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I'm sort of coaching people or working with people, there's always fear and there's always going to be. Let's not wait till there's no fear before you make a change because it's always going to be there. So it's like, can we actually just breathe through it? Because otherwise, and often it takes getting knocked down a few times and you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm changing. And it's like, we don't have to wait necessarily to that real pain point. We understand there's enough neuroscience around, there's enough people doing this work now that understand the process of change. So yeah, make the empowered decision to change out of inspiration rather than waiting to just be down and out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that is an old perception that runs deep that one does have to go through almost a crisis to wake up. which it can be effective.
Mm.
Having a shitty experience, having a near-death experience, getting just slammed in life can be, again, as Ram Dass would put it, like fierce grace. It can wake us the fuck up and be very effective. But again, it doesn't, like you said, doesn't have to be the case. We can awaken just through the joy and the grace of either the desire, the inspiration flowering through us, or that environment. It just happens very organically. I mean, there's so many different nuances and variables, but I think the old perception of it is the story of needing to hit rock bottom, that crisis. And often there's the whole kind of spiritual trip of comparing like war stories, comparing like victim stories of like, okay, what shit show woke you up, and almost like bringing in that one-upmanship of that, comparing stories.
Whose trauma's deeper?
Yeah.
It's like, and the shadow worship. Yeah, it's very much, and it's understanding that that's a pattern as well. And more often than not, in my experience, speaking to the people that I've spoken to about their change process, that's often the first spark. And maybe they get to their next plateau where things, and it's still a plateau, it still can feel just as painful as the original one. And then they wait till they hit rock bottom at that new place. And then they change again. And then it's like that in itself is actually a pattern.
Yes.
So when we recognize that, it's like, oh, okay, this is just conditioning. It's not anything personal. We want to make everything about ourselves and want to make everything personal. That's just my conditioning and my pattern. And I can change that as well. I can become someone who changes through inspiration. It hasn't been my past, but we can create anything. And so and that usually takes a few going through it. And relationships are a really powerful teacher for that, I find as well. Like if you repeat a cycle and you find somebody new and you end up in the same stuff, it's like, oh, unless I'm proactive about this, then I'm just going to keep repeating the same cycle.
Totally. You did another post the other day that inspired me. I've been loving them, about being a people pleaser, which I can totally relate to as well. That runs deep in parts of my family as well. Again, these kind of genetic runoffs and kind of family traits. I can see that in myself as well, and I've brought a lot of attention to it, and it's not so thick anymore. But that's a big one as well. That unconscious need to please. It doesn't seem like a big one. But it is. It's a really sticky trap that has a lot of suffering in it. It's really painful. It's stressful. It's stressful in a weird way. That constant worry of, did I please them enough? That constant pre-worry. I gotta please them. Am I gonna please them enough? Like, can you speak to that a little bit more for those that didn't see your post or whatever? On being Mr. Nice Guy and overcoming that and that need to please, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just preface it applies to nice girls as well.
Right.
But my experience is obviously of being Mr. Nice Guy, and I love talking about this because this was my journey to a T. I was Mr. Nice Guy, everybody's friend. And I think why it's so pervasive, like you said, it affects us so much because it's such a socially acceptable pattern. And we almost develop our identity as that's how we receive love. That's how we receive connection, is by fulfilling that. So if I let go of that, then there's that fear of not being loved. And it's not, 30-year-old Tully's fear of not being loved. It's 5-year-old Tully's fear of not being loved. And that fear is real. And so the stronghold that the people-pleasing nice guy has is really, really tight. And it flows into every area of life, relationships especially. And I just find it relates back to that emotional agility. And what changed it for me was accessing anger. And because to me it's the example I use is, we think anger is a bad emotion. If somebody breaks into your house and threatens your family, you're going to get pretty angry about it. and use that anger to do something pretty constructive for your family about it. So anger itself is not a bad thing. And it's when a boundary gets crossed, that's usually when we experience it. And often people pleasers are very, very poor boundary setters. And boundaries are being crossed all the time. And not being able to set those because we're so disconnected from that part of ourselves, it just flows into everything. And often I find people pleasers are often very empathic people. You know, ask them how they're feeling, they'll be like, oh, yeah, okay. Ask them how their neighbor's feeling, they'll be able to tell you. Ask them how their mum's feeling, they'll be able to tell you. Ask them how their friend's feeling, they'll be able to tell you. Because they're so tapped into how everybody else is feeling, just in case they're like, okay, they're a bit upset, what could I do to help them? Boom, boom. It's like a juggling act.
Which can be a beautiful thing.
And yeah, when in an empowered way, it's a magical thing.
Yeah.
But it's also like, in that, how am I feeling?
Yes.
Because mine was definitely, I had an older brother that was bullied pretty badly from a young age. So it wasn't anything necessarily that happened to me, but I witnessed what happened if you didn't fit in. So I developed very acute social awareness from a very young age. And I got so involved in how other people were feeling, other people getting agitated, that I just was disconnected from how I felt. So it wasn't like I felt angry and suppressed it. I just was so disconnected from how I was even feeling because I was so worried about how everybody else was feeling. And that's really was at the core of my people-pleasing tendencies and nice guy tendencies. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, even that seems to come back to the middle path a little bit because often it flips from that to then being narcissistically selfish and that pendulum shift. So even like refining that, cultivating that, bringing that into that accountability, witnessing, and because like we said, it can be beautiful. That empathy, that awareness of others, beautiful
Gift.
And then grounding that, burning up the insecurities, like really going deep into it's an insecure place, isn't it?
Very.
And that root chakra shit, like it's from being a kid, it's from in the womb. Who knows? It could be beyond that, prior to that, but it's deep, deep old stuff. If we're in that mode, we've probably been like that, like you said, from being a little kid. So it's an insecurity that often, if it's not really worked with, and that root chakra stuff, it can take time. It doesn't have to take time, but it is so deep and foundational of our psyche and our emotionality and just our way of operating in the world. It takes a lot of consistency and revisiting, and it's a very easy one and tempting one to bypass and just kind of shift the pendulum into this false positivity.
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden obsessed with the self and just doing self-care constantly. and the boundaries have become too strong and we're all of a sudden just obsessed with ourselves. I think that's pretty common as well. So again, like maybe the pendulum shifts for a while, kind of like the balance we're speaking of like the healthiness of pulling back from the world every now and then re-entering with more awareness, more vitality. It seems like a similar balancing act with that. If we're a people pleaser, maybe for a while, like dedicate a lot of self-care and a lot of attention inward and look into your eyes in the mirror, like these practices of really connecting with yourself at the same time. That agility we keep coming back to, which I love, that agility of witnessing if the pendulum is shift too far the other way and it's time to think about others again. And it's a refinement, like being a connoisseur of just bringing it all together, that integral embodied balance, which once again just takes real loving honesty, that shift from like judging ourselves to that honest, loving discernment. But no, thank you for sharing, because I can deeply relate and I know it runs deep in a lot of people and it can be disabling.
Especially in relationships, I find like men in relationships, it's, and we touched on, masculinity and what that used to mean and these types of things. And I know I rejected my own masculinity and my own power and these things, and that led to people pleasing. And then I find the place that's most crippling is in relationship. And one way of describing it with the masculine and feminine energies, this is what really transformed the game for me completely. I had the realization that I was more concerned with looking out for the external feminine than my internal feminine.
Right.
So the part of me that feels I would do more for the external, do more for my partner than I would for myself. And it's what you're saying before about self-love, but framing it like that, especially if people are learning about the masculine and feminine energies, which is becoming more commonly talked about. Just check in. Are you more concerned about other people's feminine than your own? If so, you're people pleasing. Because both can coexist. And like you say, you don't need to close yourself away and, not go into a room because you're an empath and, you've got the boundaries. It's check in with the intention that you're doing it with. Because if it's fear that is driving what you're doing, then you won't evolve through that into somewhere new. And so sometimes love looks like taking that time. But sometimes love looks like, giving more as well. And that simple question, like, what would love do now? And because love, we have such a powerful connection with that word. Often it's a very clear answer. Like right now, love would take myself to the beach and chill out. Or like actually right now, love would actually be holding space for my partner and be leaning into the discomfort that's there or whatever it might be. But I find checking in with the intention, is this love or fear driving in the steering wheel right now? And then am I looking out for the external feminine more so than my internal feminine, especially as a guy? That changed how I showed up. And when I shifted that internally, that's actually when I attracted Kat into my life. And this relationship is being built on that foundation compared to previous relationships where I was more in that people pleaser, disconnected sense.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. Some practical ways for people to take that step if they're relating to that. Of course, they can show up to your workshops and do that kind of thing, which I recommend. Do it in group work. Like, there's nothing quite like that camaraderie and that transmission you get from being with other people doing it as well. There's nothing quite like that. But for people to take, because some people get scared shitless to show up to those group environments, to show up to a teacher, to show up. It can be very intimidating. If they're possibly really deep in that people-pleasing mode, which in its extreme modes can be very timid, can be very, again, fear-based, they may not even fester up the courage to take that big step to show up to something that can really help them. Speaking to that extreme version, which I can relate to as well, and I know lots of people that can relate to it, can you speak to some practical steps they can do to help them shift into taking those bigger steps,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that point in itself, those smaller practical steps, I believe are underrated. I think we glorify this awakening moment, the big leap, the one decision that changed it all. I feel that's hugely glorified, and
Agree.
it's actually a series of tiny little, slightly uncomfortable but not shit scary steps that you take and you stack and you develop the momentum that you were talking about before. The most powerful practice I find is throw yourself out 3 years and imagine you're the most confident, powerful, embodied version of yourself. Everybody can imagine what that is, because if they couldn't, they wouldn't feel bad about where they are. So take some time to sit with that. What would the confident version of yourself do right now in whatever situation? And do a scan of life. If I was my most confident version of myself, I'm not going to have to do it. I just want to look at it. What would I do in relation to my relationship with my mum, with my dad, with my brother, with my sister, with work, with the guy at the coffee shop, and sort of figure out what he or she would do and then look at it. And some of those are going to be really scary, because some of it might be like, I need to tell my mum this. And the thought of doing that right now, too much. Okay, find the easiest thing on that list to do and do it. And then realize you're not going to die. And then find the second easiest thing and start to work through it like that. And let go of the attachment to what would I do, because what you would do in the now, like listening to this now, is old conditioning with an addiction to feeling a certain way. So imagine what would the most confident version of yourself do, and then do that and pick the easiest, smallest. It might even look insignificant, but know how powerful taking that one step is, and then take it again. And that's what I would be doing.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's great advice. And speaking to that kind of visioning process, like you and Kat, you're creating this beautiful life together, possibly a life that not a lot of people, you could say, have the balls to do. Like you've bought this motorhome, and
no, we're gonna buy.
Okay, yeah, just stuff like that we kind of spoke about before. These kind of conventional modes that people tend to have of what it is when you get married and you're thinking about kids and all that kind of thing. Can you speak to that visioning process that I know you guys do a bit of, and we do it as well, of like maybe one feels locked into those old confines of what it is to be married or single, or just these thick boxes that our society creates and that can be uncomfortable breaking through. It seems like a similar process to designing the life of your dreams, you know? So I'll hand it over to you in a bit, but I'll just speak to my observation of the kind of the secret, you know, the secret that a lot of people got excited about, and so did I. I think it was a great stepping stone for people and got a lot of people motivated and excited and more skillful at like envisioning the life of their dreams. For many that I've observed, if they jump too big into that grand vision and it's too heady, too just not felt, not grokked with, not vibed with, it's pretty ineffective. So I've seen quite a bit of that of like, okay, Ferrari and 3 houses and like the dream, the societal dream, you know, and then nothing happens. Then they thicken even more cynicism, even more of the old kind of conditioning, and they become heavily complacent. So do you feel that can be helpful as well in starting small, you know, like maybe have those big visions, but then like contemplate and sit with it and practice with it. Like, what do I really want? And maybe starting small if like you're in a heavy rut, and you can't even get off the couch and get anything happening. You're creating the life of your dreams, and it's beautiful to witness. Can you speak to that at first from the vantage point of one really struggling with motivation, really locked into just the fear modes? You know, what can they do to get, again, that momentum, you know? Same kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it is two different processes. If you're really struggling and really stuck and really down, we can only imagine and move, like the state that we're in affects what we're able to contemplate. So our physiological state, the food we're eating, the amount we're moving, all of these things, if that's all locked down and stuck and stagnant, then you won't be able to contemplate that big dream. And if you can, you won't be able to take a step towards it. So the basics of getting healthy.
Yeah, totally.
The basics of raising your vibration in simple steps that everybody knows how to do, or if not, they've got a friend that knows how to do and that can help them. But get yourself feeling good, get out into nature. So that puts your body in a state where then you're able to actually have some sort of dream or vision. And then the second thing is check in if it's actually yours, or is that your parents', or is that society's, or is that, because I'd say 99% of the people who put the Ferrari up on the vision board don't really give a shit about the Ferrari. And if our vision isn't real for us, we won't move towards it. Like that's the biggest reason people don't hit goals, and the biggest reason I haven't hit goals in the past is they weren't my goals to hit. Of course we're not going to hit them. And then and it's a dangerous trap because then you can get jaded about the process. So it's focusing on getting yourself in a physiological state where you can actually create meaningful change and have a meaningful vision, and then really check in with what feels good for you. And then I love the power in throwing it out quite far, because then it moves beyond people's limiting beliefs. Because if you're making a vision for a year from now and you're like, I want this, your monkey mind is going to be like, you can't create that. You can't do that. And then so it disrupts the whole process. Whereas if you say throw it out 5 years, anything can happen in 5 years. Think back to 5 years ago now. Anything can happen in 5 years. So it loosens the chains on all those limiting beliefs and allows you to start to feel it, but actually embodying that. And then it's like, okay, cool. What do I have? Important. But also imagine you did this visioning process 5 years ago. It wouldn't be what you're currently living. And so understanding the what and how it looks will change, but tap into how you want to feel. I want to feel more free. I want to feel more love and connected. I want to feel more peace. I want to feel like, what do you want to feel? And then actually feel that now. So rather than this comparison-driven, head-based vision that isn't yours that you can't feel, actually visualize and focus on how you want to feel. And then how that looks, it doesn't really matter. Whereas we're so addicted to this comparison and then showing everybody on Instagram that without even realizing it, we're hyper vigilant about our environment and how things look. And really, it doesn't matter how it looks, because if you want to feel loved, connected, free, and peaceful, it doesn't really matter how it looks, but yet that's what we're attached to. So really anchoring in that feeling and bringing the feeling into now. So whether it's with a morning practice or like, okay, I want to feel more freedom in my vision. What can I do this week that makes me feel more free? Okay, go fishing. Okay, I'm going to go fishing once a week so I can tap into that feeling of freedom. Because I feel like, The Secret, it was a bit heady. And I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Dispenza's work, but I've got so much from his work. He talks about the thought, you're casting the vision out, and the feeling is the magnet that brings it back.
Yeah, he's great.
So unless you can feel it, you're not going to create it. And so that's what I would suggest. If somebody's really battling and struggling, like maybe don't worry about the huge vision yet. Get yourself into a state where you're feeling better. So physiologically, you're feeling better, and then do that process.
Totally. Great advice. We got to start from the foundation. Yeah. One extreme version of that, the other polarity from the more material-based thing that we're kind of I touched upon with The Secret is the austere practice. So the renunciate path, which is pretty common as well. I'll just give everything up, all desire, all goals, and just sit in that feeling of fulfillment and God and love with nothing. And I think that can be effective as well, but even that can be taken to extreme, in which similar to the escape mode we've been speaking to a bit about as well, like take away all distraction, take away all emotionality, all newspapers, take away all form, really, so I can just sit in that feeling of fulfillment. For me, it feels like a happy balance, especially if we are wanting to be in the world of relationship. Maybe we don't. Maybe for this trip, we are meant to just be by ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the trip I thought I was on before I met Joe. I thought I was a yogi doing that whole classic thing of kind of giving up the world, and that felt peaceful. It felt very comfortable. It was a great time in my life to integrate that into stuff, to integrate that into needing to feed a baby. It's different. It's not that old model. So for me, it exactly that. We got to take care of the body. We got to get our frequency up. Otherwise, we're going to be useless. Where it's just going to be that old mode of grinding, even though we're fucking miserable and
missing the point. Yeah.
So taking care of ourselves, that beautiful balance,
Mm.
having that big 5-year span, I totally vibe with that.
Mm.
I vibe with that and starting small.
Yeah.
Kind of like, have you caught on to any of Jordan Peterson's current work? Yeah. So
His stuff is great.
I'm digging it. A lot of people aren't. It's kind of, that's very polarized. Like people are either loving him or hating him. But the kind of basic advice he weaves in there at the beginning, clean up your fucking room.
Yeah.
Clean up your fucking room
Yeah.
is quite huge.
And just take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
And you're doing that's a very great first goal. If you're just taking care of yourself, then you're not a burden to those around you. Like that's a very admirable goal to work towards.
Yeah.
And I don't think we give that enough credit.
True.
Just taking care of it. And then next, take care of our family. It's like, you are winning.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's this dream, or again, it's glorified. Like, I want to change the world. I want to serve the millions of people. And that's awesome. But where are you at?
Yeah.
Where's your family at? Let's start there and understand how powerful and what that's actually doing for the collective. That's why I'm so passionate about relationship. It all starts at home. Mother Teresa, if we all cleaned our own doorstep, the whole world would be clean. So let's focus on that and pat ourselves on the back. Hey, I'm doing a good job. And the other thing I love about Jordan Peterson is that life is suffering, but you're equipped with everything required. Like you are equipped with what is required to get through. And if you can enjoy some of the process, awesome. And so understanding that not from a cynical way, but from an empowering way, you stop resisting what is a little bit, which is what you talked about, that sort of middle ground. And when you stop resisting what is, you enjoy it. And that search for fulfillment over happiness, this like addiction to happiness, I feel is, the root of so much suffering.
So much. And that's running pretty thick in our whole kind of neo-tantric scene. This kind of, I spoke with Rod Stryker, a very masterful yoga teacher, and he's a tantric teacher really, and very knowledgeable about it, embodying it deeply. You'd love him actually. He's great. He's referring to it as it's not really being a tantric, it's being a sensualist. And that there's that whole mode of overindulging, over-sensualizing. Like if it's not magnificent and orgasmic and blissful, and if it's not making me happy, get it away. And what I do appreciate about what some would view as a nihilistic conversation, a lot of people are labeling Jordan Peterson as being very nihilistic and masochistic and all that, negative, yet all of these deep, empowering mystical traditions, including Tantra, point to that mystical teaching of life is suffering and suffering is grace. And again, we can grab a hold of that with one channel of the mind and go, well, that's just being negative. That's just being nihilistic. That isn't productive as well. Let's just be positive. Let's just focus on joy and let's just sensualize everything. And again, that middle ground, life is full of suffering. And if we can cultivate the tools to deal with it in the way that we've been speaking to back and forth, where we've got that agility, which I love. I've really sunk that in. I love it. And then we can also find the beauty and the bliss in the mundane. Because it's a literal conversation. I hear it all the time in the scene of like, oh, they're just mundane. Or that's just mundane. Like I don't want any part of it. And it's too mundane for me, or it's too like they're just mortals. And it's just like shit that really thickens the divide. So I've been really appreciating like the simple shit. The big shit too, that's great. I love getting into great, awesome out there experiences for sure. But if I'm pushing away and putting a negative spiel on the more negative and mundane stuff of life, I'm missing out on a lot. Like, may I be present while I'm cleaning up a pooey nappy? May I like be fully present while I'm doing the dishes? Why be a grumpy dickhead and like resent it? Like, can bring joy into that. To anything. And that's what I love about those tantric practices of bringing joy into anything and everything. And yes, life is suffering, but if we pay close enough attention, even there is love, there is bliss.
Yeah.
Like when Joe's mum was passing, it was a really intense, drawn-out death, a lot of suffering. And Joe was just right by her side the whole time, and her mantra was, all there is love, all there is love, all there is love. And there was no, when she went that deep, she couldn't feel the difference between when she was there and when she wasn't. And if we can be rooted in love, like you touched upon, doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter what environment we're in. On the relative plane, it's good to be smart. Of like you said, if it's good to temporarily create the environment that is going to support you in supporting your purpose, supporting you in flowering into your fullest potential. But then as we mature in it, we want to be in that love energy no matter what situation we're in, which is what I'm very interested in. And may we bring it into the death process rather than being so scared of that whole thing, which is legitimately, it's scary. It's I'm scared of it still, for sure. I got a lot of fucking work to do with it. And, but that feels where the real juice is. These places in our culture that have been so taboo and so kind of put behind curtains of denial and ignorance, and finding the love there and then, and in the simplicity of just cleaning up our room and like tending to the garden is often a metaphor as well. Like it's good to get out there and have these grand activism dreams, but how's your room? How's your garden? How's your relationships?
Yeah, definitely.
Which you're bang on with, huh?
Yeah, the old, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water.
Exactly.
And the beautifulness in the simplicity, because it can become an addiction, like those hyper, like neo-tantric, like everything's got to be sensual and orgasmic and all of this stuff. It's literally an addiction to
or
that.
extremely cathartic. Like extremely, like that kind of polarity.
Yeah. And then again, let's zoom out. And what's the whole point? What's the whole point of everything that you're doing? And it's because more often than not, that'll flow into relationship. And if there's not volcanoes in the relationship, they can't feel anything. And if there's not volcanoes at work, and if there's not a drama to talk about, if there's not all of this stuff, and it's just a cycle, it's just a pattern. And then if you go back to childhood, that's what childhood was like for them. So it looks very different, but it's just that familiar state of nervous system stimulation and finding more peace. And my favorite practice is to zoom out and what's the point? And that's why I made some changes over the last few years, because my house was a mess and I was out here trying to run workshops and do things. And my intent was always, it's not like as soon as I became aware of it, I pivoted and I was like, whoa, hold on a second here. But that to me has been is my house clean? Like literally is my house, not figuratively, but that, because that matters. I believe anyway, that matters. And then from there we've got it's like those concentric circles. It's me, relationship and family, community, country, that we've got a lot to do before we can go and impact the world. and there's nobility in the small stuff and recognizing that, and that brings fulfillment for me. When I reprogrammed that and checked in, I was like, oh wait, a lot of me wants to go and do these things because I'll be seen for doing these things. As good as they are and as pure as my intentions are, I'll be seen doing that. I won't be seen scrubbing my toilet.
Okay. Yeah, bang on, man.
And so, bringing nobility to the little things, to how deeply am I truly loving Kat? Like I check in with that. And so all of these things, and I'm not, by far and away, I'm not perfect and have not got this nailed. Like,
if Jo listens to this, she'll be like, what are you talking about, man? You're never cleaning up shit.
Yeah.
And it's an area where that's one of my deepest samskaras, one of my deepest old conditioning. For one, mess doesn't bother me. It actually doesn't. I actually feel fine in a messy situation. I definitely feel better when there's clear spaces. But, Jo's really riding my ass about cleaning. And I appreciate it. I'm inviting her to stay on my ass about keeping tidy, because it is a practice for me, but it's a deep old thing of like growing up in a messy place and having a mum that was also very content and peaceful in a messy place, you know?
And it's familiar.
Yeah, it's
actually kind of nice.
Yeah, it's kind of nice for sure. So that's a big practice for me, and it feels good. It feels great. Like I feel it raise my frequency for sure. So it seems so minor and so again mundane, yet it can be very powerful.
Yeah.
And then you go out in the world,
Yeah.
taking care of your direct things, your direct life experiences, cleaned up the room, whatever it is, whatever your platform is. But everyone can relate to that.
Definitely.
And then you feel more in order, so to speak, in alignment to then go out into the world.
Yeah, definitely. And Kat would be the same if she she's so big. My big reflection is that the play and the present, because I can be very vision focused and mission focused, which is real for me. But yeah, just the presence and the play and the simplicities of having a morning and there's nothing in the to-do list and the magic in that. Like that's taken a lot for me to let go of my structure and all of that. And so it's a constant evolution and this in itself, like, you know, you've been teaching for however many years you've been teaching. And so the ability to say, this is where I'm going and I'm not perfect. That old model of guru teaching down is just, it's dead. And it's still what, in my mind anyway, it's still
dying.
very present.
It's still very
dying,
present, but it's dying. Yeah.
But it's just, we're all in this together. And because I also see the opposite of that is people, the fear of being a fraud, holding people back from sharing what they've learned.
Right.
Because, oh, well, who am I to share this or to speak about this or to, you know, even just in terms of sharing stuff on social media, not even in a work sense, because they haven't 100% nailed it yet.
Okay.
And so speaking to, it's okay to speak about these things that we're working towards. And, you know, if you're waiting till you're perfect before you start sharing, you'll be waiting a very, very long time.
Totally. And the teachers that I resonate most deeply with have that humility, have that relatability. And no matter how masterful they are, which I also appreciate, they're just honest about their life, honest about their neuroses, honest about where they're fucking up. And for me, that's where so much of the power is. I do agree that I don't think it's quite dead, but it's going down pretty strong, that old guru model. Once again, I've seen the pendulum shift the other way pretty far, where a lot of people have tuned into that teaching of the guru is within, which it is, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, it's all, once again, coming to that value of mentorship and having
100%.
that, because there is value in that old model of guru disciple. It really did help keep the student accountable and help the student actually do the deep work. Because what's pretty common now is the guru is within. I don't need a fucking teacher. I'll just read The Power of Now and watch The Secret and I'm sorted.
Yeah, and post about it on Instagram.
Yeah, and that can work for a while. And I've seen like the downfall of that. If one prematurely steps into the role, so I'm totally hearing you on people not feeling like they're worthy of sharing or teaching, but then there's the other polarity of people stepping into the role of teacher or master teacher or tantrika or whatever prematurely, haven't quite done the integrative work and the embodied of it, and they actually hit the wall hard. They become overwhelmed, the identity crisis, like, so it's again the middle way of like stepping up and sharing, going for it, at the same time being honest and staying accountable. Again, I do see it again and again. And some of the symptoms of it have been quite serious, like that huge high of getting a lot of praise and being in that whole sensualist, neo-tantric, exciting arena and getting a lot of praise, and all of a sudden you're on that pedestal. And then if one hasn't matured into it and actually had the kind of initiations that have been a part of this whole thing for a long time, the rite of passages and the initiations, one can feel very, that polarity, they can go from and then deep, deep depression. And we've even seen suicides of people not being fully honest with it, which is what it's all about. But it can be so exciting and so empowering on many levels. So again, that fine line of like, share and get out there and like, you're awesome. At the same time, like tune in with elders that can keep us in check. It's super helpful. Like that tough love of like, come on, man, your ego's getting a bit inflamed there. Like, come on.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
helpful, you
and
know.
if you're a mentor without mentors, it's like that's a bit. And even it looks very different. It might come in the form of friendships, and that buddy system, like you say, that can be your mentorship circle, or a coach who's coaching people that doesn't have a coach. And it's like there's just something off, and I see it in the whole Neo Tantra world. And I've also kind of got one foot in the coaching NLP, that world. And it's running even more rampant there because, you know, you can be really good at marketing and really bad at coaching and end up with a lot of coaching clients and not know how to coach.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's, what I've also seen is the truth will prevail and it won't stand the test of time. And it's just, the thing to be wary of is it can do damage. Like you say, it can be a very...
Well, that's the truth coming in.
Yeah, and it is. Whatever you had to learn before you stepped into it, if you're going to learn it one way or another. And so the whole addiction to instant gratification, or why am I not a teacher yet? Well, it's because you're 23 and you're still, and it's not saying 23-year-olds don't have things to share. Like Kat is 22 and what she shares.
Wow. Yeah, she's rocking it, man. Wow.
So, but it's that instant gratification, and the power of social media, I think, is still underestimated, even though it's spoken about a lot, of what we can create in terms of an identity and a following and all of these things. You can start to read your own press a little bit and be like, oh, it can mess with you. And then you look at your own life and you're like, this is where everybody's holding me up on this pedestal, and this is where I'm feeling right now down here. And if that gap gets too big, it can be very, very destructive.
Totally. Yeah, it feels like a really healthy conversation because it is uncharted territory, especially the Instagram movement. Yeah, it is powerful, like you said, and I agree. I do think we underestimate it. And as it continues to go in the direction that it's going, and if we don't have the discernment and the witnessing, the extricating from it, the times of unplugging, we can just, it's like it takes over our nervous system. And I often speak about it. I see it in myself, even though I'm fully aware of it. Every now and then I'll be plugged into it in a very unconscious way, even though I'm conscious of it. It's strange, very strange. And
it's powerful.
Powerful. And I think we need conversations around it as it keeps going. Like, who am I really? Who am I really beyond my social media image? Feels like that contemplation should be in fucking schools now because there's this new phenomenon with the kids that have been brought up with it. This literal identifying with that social media image, like spending more time like that, phone in front, locked in, than eye to eye, word to word, radical. So
a crazy story on that. A company that I do some work with, AdventureWorks, they do sort of school camps for kids, and they weave in sort of rites of passage, social and emotional learning to adventure-based camps. And they do some expeditions, sort of 5 days on the Cape to Cape and these kinds of things. And I wasn't on this camp, but I think it was on the third day, and they were hiking. They came over this hill, and because they'd not allowed their phones for these 5 days. And a kid went into a full-blown anxiety attack because he saw, like, the view was spectacular and he couldn't take a photo and share it. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was this, and it was because I didn't have social media at school. So I didn't, until hearing sort of stories like that, I don't think we understand the effect that it's actually having. And yeah, it's this funny thing though, because you've got to be in it to be able to influence it. So, it's like, and there's the light and dark of everything. Social media is one of those things. The power to inflict positive change is huge. But it's just recognizing, oh, wow, understanding the old, with great power comes great responsibility. I think understanding the power of it and speaking to that more, I think
Totally.
would be a worthwhile conversation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And even bringing it into the practice of fasting from it, like
Yeah.
just starting off with that, like
hmm
give yourself a day break every now and then. I think that is going to become more common knowledge of
Mm,
how beneficial and even necessary.
hmm
And I don't do it regularly. I
mm,
don't do it every week, no doubt. But the weeks that I do give myself a day or two without it,
hmm
it's better,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
And it's been a practice for me to again utilize it for the good and for business and for promo and
Mm,
all that. It's very helpful.
mm,
Like we probably wouldn't have connected without it, and many
exactly.
people, Joe and I wouldn't have. We
Mm,
wouldn't have made babies if it
yeah.
wasn't for fucking Facebook.
Yeah.
That's how we
Literally.
connected.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm all for it. There's huge
Yeah.
positives.
Yeah.
It's unifying our world, and it's making communication
Mm,
beautiful. But fuck, the dark side of it is
mm,
really dark.
mhm,
So unplugging from it every now and then
mm,
is hugely beneficial. Keeping that wise discernment refreshed, sharp, like paying attention. How do I feel when
mm,
I go to sleep while looking at the phone? How do I
mhm.
feel when I wake up and grab the phone straight away? It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Does not feel good. And I do it every now and then. I
Mm,
try not to, but
mm.
every now and then I do, especially if it is a busy day
Yeah.
or I got a lot of shit to take care of and do, or I just haven't had time. I
Mm.
will, and it doesn't feel good.
No.
So, like leaving the phone out of the bedroom is one of my. Uh, I don't do it all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do like to listen to a yoga nidra or a
Yeah.
meditation as I go to sleep, and
Mm.
I very much try to have it on flight mode and not be
Mhm.
fucking scrolling through
Yeah.
social media as I go to sleep. I do think that is really destructive on
Mm.
people, and that wake up and looking straight at it, looking at it while shitting, like all of that. It's
Can't even take a shit in peace
yeah.
anymore. So what is the world coming to?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's quite huge, you know?
And like just getting real with, humble enough to admit the power it has over us,
Yeah,
because it's almost embarrassing,
right.
really. And what I realized for me, I had to delete, because I would put it on flight mode, but then I would be like, oh, my trick would be I've got to check one message because that has something to do with the morning, and then I'm in. And so what I found to be really effective is I delete the apps before I go to. I've only just started doing this the last couple
Mm,
of weeks, and I'll delete the apps whenever I decide to switch off for the night,
mm.
and then I won't upload the apps again until the morning when I'll start my workday, whether
Good
it's at
idea.
9 or. And initially I was like, oh, that's so impractical. It takes so much time. It's about 20 seconds to re-download the app.
Like 20 seconds, man.
That's all it takes to re-download. So it takes nothing out of my productive workday, yet then I know, because the habit is to look at the phone. And then if the Facebook or the Instagram button's just there, it's too easy.
Yeah.
And the dopamine hit is too tasty for our brain.
Mm,
So understand, like for me, being humble enough to admit the power that little thing had on
right.
me was, I didn't want to, but I have to delete the apps.
Yeah.
That's what I have to do, and put it in another room.
Good
And
advice. And well, not that you advised it, but you admitted that that's what you do. And I think it
yeah,
is good advice anyway. And but isn't it strange that even that 20 seconds of waiting for the app to load, like that's too long for some people. Waiting, watching that wheel spin or whatever as it loads can be agonizing. Everything's become so quick. And if the internet's not like that 5G, just quick,
yeah,
and something there straight away, it can even that similar possibly to what you described of the kid on the mountaintop, unable to broadcast it, bringing up heaps of anxiety. I think being aware of that discomfort, being humble with it is huge. And to hear people like yourself and myself just be honest with that and our addictions to it. And we
Yeah.
weren't even fucking brought up with it.
yeah,
And
because it's socially acceptable.
yeah,
That's why it can slip by the radar. If somebody's
Right.
doing heroin, it's clear they've got an addiction.
yeah,
Somebody's scrolling Facebook, it's not as obvious, but neurologically what's going on. It's, if somebody's binge eating, even that's obvious these days. So it's a very socially acceptable addiction, but it's still an addiction numbing you to something, the pain, whatever it might be. And going back to that original, if somebody's stuck in the rat race and doing it, it all links in, because these things, these vices are numbing us and they're socially acceptable. So there's no real drive to disconnect from it. Whereas if you're a heroin addict, there's drive because it's more socially acceptable not to be.
Right.
So it's a real danger area because there's no external drive for you to change that. It has to come from internally.
Yeah. Again, that wise discernment, paying close attention, doing it with honesty, loving awareness, all of that. But I think this is a good place to gradually wrap it up. Is there anything you want to share with the listeners? Anything coming up?
Yeah, sure. Like me and Tim Morrison, who you've had on the podcast, we are launching, probably by the time you get this podcast up, it'll be launched. So this week we're launching a one-day event for men. So the last Sunday of May, all around what we were talking about, sort of reclaiming this power, letting go of the people pleaser, letting go of the nice guy. My journey with that was the power was in that workshop space. Like you say, if you're really uncomfortable and that's too much, fair enough, do what you can. But my encouragement is look at that and get yourself in a room with other men.
And they probably won't be the only one.
I'd say nobody really coming is comfortable about it, because if you're so comfortable in it, you probably won't be there.
Right.
Most people there are uncomfortable. And then when you look around a room and you ask who's uncomfortable and every single guy puts his hand up, all of a sudden you feel pretty comfortable pretty quickly. Yeah. So, we've got that event coming up. And then, just connect with me on social media after having that big rant about not spending as much time on it.
It's all about the balance.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm over on Instagram at Tully O'Connor, and I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, mainly working with men. I do work with some women, but mainly working with men around all of this stuff we've touched on, tapping back into what's true for you and practical ways of bringing that into reality so you can experience more fulfillment and more of the good stuff of life.
Awesome, man. Well, I love your work, Tully. Thank you for coming over. Great to chat.
Thanks
I love
for
that.
having
Let's
me.
do it again.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Enjoyed it.
Take care.
Cheers.